Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of Family Education and Justice Committee. I remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I've agreed the attendance of some members remotely and just remind them to mute their microphones when not speaking and for all of us to do the same. So we'll move on to apologies or substitutions.
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies from Councillors Chris Beattie, Derek Wan and Beth Whiteside, with Councillors Bill Duff, Craig Fotheringham and Brian Boyd substituting. Apologies from Reverend Christine Hay also.
Thank you, Liz. Declarations of interest or statements of transparency? No. Fine, thank you. We go on to the minutes at number 3. Previous meeting. Do we agree that is a correct record? And the special meeting? And staffing sub. Thank you. And we go on to number 4, which is Angus Child Protection Committee Annual Report, August 22 to July 23. And Alison Todd is going to open this. This is last time that Alison is going to present this report. She did it at the Scrutiny and Audit Committee, but this is her last time. So we just all want to thank you so much, Alison, for the work that you've put in. I think it's 5 years you've been in that position, and that is a huge amount of work, and you've driven this forward beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's not my intention to go through the report and provide as much detail as I did at the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, but questions are very welcome on any particular areas. So really just to say that I am pleased to present this report, which highlights both the development improvement work of the Child Protection Committee and the multi-agency workforce, but as well as highlighting the services delivered and the ongoing need of vulnerable children and families in Angus. It's clear to everyone that these are incredibly challenging times with the cost of living crisis and budget pressures. However, that said, I'm very confident that the Child Protection Committee and its associated work meets the needs of children and families and will continue to do that, as well as developing and improving its work based on the feedback from children and families. We have demonstrated how we have embedded the new legislation from the Child Protection Guidance, and importantly are continuing to strive to improve services in line with the promise and the Bairnhouse standards. My appreciation obviously goes to all the workforce involved, and I hope that I can give assurance and confidence to the committee in this work.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Alison? Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. There's lots in this report, and it was quite interesting to read. Just for clarity, I just want to check something. In here it mentions about national guidance and things like that. So just for clarity, does that refer to Scotland or does that refer to the UK? And the reason I ask that is that on page 15, which is your independent chair's forward, it mentions National Guidance for Children for Protection Scotland, but in the paragraph before it mentions that shared parenting group of MPs and councillors. So should that be MPs as in the UK government, or should it be MSPs? So hence, just why I wanted a bit of clarity on that one.
Okay, the guidance relates only to Scotland, and if in that paragraph, which is not in front of me, it should say MSPs. Our national guidance comes from Scotland.
Well spotted. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thanks, and as has been said, it is a very comprehensive report. I just wanted to touch on the Bairnshuis model. Obviously, in there, it's talking about Pathfinder sites, and I just wonder if you could just give us a bit more of an outline on where we are within that.
There are probably other people here who have more information because it doesn't sit underneath the Child Protection Committee, but my knowledge is that we are working across Tayside and are currently looking at the best way that we can make sure that we fulfil the standards. We have looked at a shared space in Dundee, although we would try wherever possible to provide the majority of services as close to possible as children and young people. So it is in very early stages, but for me, the key is actually implementing the standards as opposed to where it actually is geographically. It's about making sure children and young people have access to services that are easily accessible and, you know, child friendly, and that we ensure that the standards in terms of the joint investigative interviews and therapeutic care afterwards is available for all young people. Perhaps Catherine might add more in terms of the big group that covers Tayside.
I think Kirsty Lee's here. She's going to say something here.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. So Bairnshuis has been subject of a report to this committee, I think, previously, and there's a bit of detail in there. But just to recap, so we are part of a Tayside Pathfinder project. What we're doing with Bairnshuis is really looking at the experience of children and their families sort of from the very beginning of the child protection process right through to the end. And that's quite different to how we approach that at the moment. The current system is recognised across Scotland as quite disjointed, and the Bairnshuis is actually an approach, as Alison says, it's about embedding standards of how we provide whole family support, recognising that a child going through that child protection system could be experiencing some of the most traumatic events that they absolutely will do in their lives. So for us, it was about breaking that down, looking at the referral process in, how involved children are in that experience. The investigative interview will also bring in the Scottish Child Interview Model, so there's a huge development nationally around that. You know, how do children experience joint interviews and sometimes then forensic medicals? So the plan is really engaging all of those areas. So Dundee will take the lead on the forensic medicals. Angus, we are primarily leading on the safe space and the trauma responsive space for children and young people when they come to experience a child protection interview, but also when we then assess with them and with their family what their recovery needs are. A significant part of the Bairnshuis pilot is about therapeutic services and, you know, the recognition that they are best delivered through third sector services. So part of the grant funding is being used to commission a support service that will be available potentially to see a child and their family from the very beginning of the process through. And that will be, you know, there'll be a lot of learning that comes through the pilot in the next year and a half.
Lovely, thank you very much, Kirsty. Are there any more questions? Councillor Speed.
Yeah, it was in relation to the appendix, and I just wondered if you could perhaps explain just how our workforce will cope. I note within the report that, you know, we have a lot of working groups and subgroups and multi-agency groups that seem to be running in line with these pieces of work, and I just wonder how they'll cope due to the ongoing cuts in services and resources.
I might defer to Kirsty, but from the chair and from the Child Protection Committee, we are very aware of the challenges that the workforce have and are really currently looking internally to see how we can actually cut down on those committees and work streams by ensuring that they're short term And one of the other area, and also by bringing groups together. So you will notice at the beginning of the report, there's a flow diagram, and we've actually moved forward from them in terms of how we organise our subgroups. So you'll be aware that the Child Protection Committee and the Adult Protection Committee is going to merge. But key to that is really what happens underneath with the subgroups and how we can bring groups together to avoid people attending the same meeting with a very similar agenda twice. Also how we can pool the work of adult protection and child protection together. If you get it right for children, you're probably going to get it right for adults, and there's much of the work that we do that we're able to share across the services. So that's one area of really being very clear and looking very carefully at who attends what meetings, what the agenda is. And that would be similar with, for instance, the promise, where we have actually brought the promise under the Children and Services integrated board, just to make sure, and also having the chairs actually linking into these, so that we're not always expecting people from the workforce to do that work. So I think that we're really fine-tuning some of the more strategic work that we do to avoid the workforce, doing any duplication at all. I think the second thing is to say that we've successfully done that with our learning and development work stream, and are very good now at actually sharing the learning and development across all of the multi-agencies that we work with, so that we're avoiding duplication there. So I think it's ongoing, but I think it's very significant what we're doing with the Child Protection Committee and the Adult Protection Committee just now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want Kirsty to answer a little bit there as well? Carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, Alison, thank you for that summary of all the work that we're doing to try and rationalise, how we deliver on all of these demands. And thank you, Councillor Speed, for recognising that there is a significant increase in demand. It runs right through the core of this report. It's been experienced by every agency that's a member of the Child Protection Committee, and that you see there the significant increase in demand, an increase in referrals by over 20%, an increase in pre-birth that need followed up by 32%, and a significant increase across the years in child concern reports, for example. So there is no doubt there is pressure in the system. And we recognise that. I think we assess that as part of our multi-agency risk register through the committee. I think what this report does is gives assurance that the safety of children and child protection remains a very high priority for every single agency. That, however, doesn't mean that there are implications for the broader range of services that are provided. I think what we have is absolute assurance that the safety of children and child protection features right at the top. We've no indication from any member of our committees that they are struggling to meet that demand. However, in the round of how we meet the needs of all services and all children, in terms of universal service provision and targeted service provision, then it absolutely has to be considered. So that risk remains. It's continued to be addressed and asked the questions, around the Child Protection Committee. Can we continue to prioritise this group of children? It's not raised a significant risk at the moment, but I think it's healthy that we continue to look at the demand for all services in the context of child protection.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. Are there any more questions? Therefore, we go on to comments. Any comments? Yes. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, colleagues. This is something very close to my heart. Page 11, fourth bullet point down, and I read there a positive message that it's, especially for Alison sitting there on her last day involved in this, the number of children on the Angus Child Protection Register decreases from 61 to 40 in the year. And it goes on to speak about that, and it speaks about domestic abuse and parental mental health continue to be the most commonly recorded factors indicating the risk of significant harm. Now, that will not be a surprise to anybody that should be the case. And I would also maybe add in there that we've reminded, Chair, of COVID being a very difficult one, not only for child protection, but for domestic abuse in families, which are obviously interconnected quite a bit. So it's not a question, Chair, it's a comment that at least I'm seeing there, I'm reading there, numbers have gone down to a degree, because that's something that I'm comforted to read. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. As has been intimated by myself and other members, this is quite a lengthy report on a challenging and delicate subject. The thing that did stand out particularly to me was the work involving dads. Quite often I find that dads are generally forgotten about, and it's good to see that this has formed a part of this report where a lot of work is doing a lot of work with dads, and even in their key development areas for next steps is further development of involving dads' work. I think quite a lot of the time it's forgotten just how an integral part to a family a dad can be and how important they are to children as well, and it's good to see that in this report that that's being recognised and is going to be continued to recognised and continue to further developed so that dads are not forgotten about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Absolutely agree there. Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, Convener, and thanks, Alison. It would be a bit rude probably if I was to mention how long we've known each other, but you had a very successful career and you chose to come back to Angus and you chose to do this work. And when it comes to giving something back, well, by Jove, you've given far more than anyone could ever ask for. And especially for some of the most vulnerable bairns in Angus. I think it's tremendous what you've done. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brays. That was lovely. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much, Convener. And again, I'd just like to reiterate what was said. Alison, you know, you've actually been a real star in producing the goods. And I'd just like to follow on from what Councillor Ross Gregg said. He mentioned dads. Well, I know that granddads and grannies actually play a really, really important role. We're talking about young children. And I, although they're not singled out in the report, I just want to make people aware that dads, yeah, very important, but so are granddads and grannies who often pick up the tab and with babysitting and various other things and help the children in their younger and formative years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Any other comments? No, well. Sorry? I'm always thinking I'm going to miss somebody's hand there. Right, well, thank you again very much, Alison. I think Councillor Brays said it beautifully, just how much you have done and given to the children and young people of Angus. So we come to the recommendations. It's 3.2. There are two recommendations: reviews the content of the Angus Child Protection Committee annual report and notes the Council's cross-departmental responsibilities. Do you agree? Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. We go on to number 5, the outcome of consultation, Hayeshead and St Thomas nursery classes. Kelly McIntosh is going to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to inform members of the outcome of a statutory consultation and seek approval to progress to the next stage of implementing administrative changes to the management structure for Hayeshead and St Thomas nursery classes. If agreed today, the decision of the committee will be referred to Scottish ministers for a final decision. As agreed by the Children and Learning Committee in June 2023, this consultation was carried out in terms of the Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010. Approving the proposal will allow Angus Council to deliver educational benefits, enabling us to improve the overall delivery of the early curriculum with better use of space and resources. Leadership capacity will also be improved. If approved, these improvements can be implemented with no disruption to children. Opportunities will be provided to staff at both settings and parents and carers to engage in planning for the revised arrangements. An independent evaluation of our educational benefits statement by His Majesty's Inspectorate for Education agreed with our proposed benefits. The consultation was open to all Angus residents, including 108 families and 31 staff members who would be directly impacted by the proposal. Consultees were invited to give their views through a range of methods, including an online survey, an invitation to write to the Director, a public meeting and a staff meeting. Responses to the consultation were low in relative terms, with 19 responses to the online survey, 2 emails directly to the education mailbox, no one attending the public meeting. 19 staff attended the staff meeting. Almost all of the comments received during the consultation related to the operational organisation of the proposed new setting, and you'll see that in the report today. I'm joined today by Beth Reader. Beth leads all of our work in relation to changes to our school estate, and Neil Loudon and Sheena Locke, who lead on our early years and primary provision, and we'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Are there any questions? I see no questions. Then comments. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to give you notice of, I'd like to propose an amendment to the recommendations.
Can we have the amendment, please?
Of course. My amendment is that with the results of the public consultation showing a clear majority against the administrative closure of Hayeshead and St Thomas's nursery classes, that they remain open.
Do you have a seconder?
I do. It's Councillor Louise Nicholl.
Okay. Are you circulating that, or?
Convener, if I could ask the clerk to circulate the contents of the amendment, which has some financial commentary in relation to that, and also it would be up to yourself whether you would wish a short recess at this time to consider the contents of the amendment.
Yes, I'm sure we will have a recess.
Would you like to have that recess now, Convener?
Have we? Oh, has this come through to us? Oh, right. Okay. Yes, I think a 5-minute recess would be probably enough. Okay. Thank you.
John, can you stop?
Thank you for coming back. I'm sorry, we are going to have a little extra time. I'm going to say 10 minutes this time so that we don't get rushed like that again. So I'm sorry about that, but 10 minutes, we'll be back at 2:45. Thank you. Do we agree to that? Do you agree to Right, thanks everybody. Right, Councillor Gregg, would you like to speak to your amendment, please?
Thank you, Convener. As is noted in the report, last year we agreed as a committee to have a consultation on the administrative closure of that of these two nurseries, and today we have the papers before us that shows the results of that consultation. As an elected member of Angus Council, I feel that it's my duty to take on board the opinions of the public, for those that have been consulted on, and also, of course, the officer's recommendations. I do also note that in this report, as I've stated, that the majority of the people that did respond, 52.6%, did not agree with the proposals. It's also noted within the report that there was a very small uptake in the consultation, but it doesn't ask, or it doesn't give any answers to the question as to why the uptake was so low. I know that from reading through the report, there was various things done, there were emails sent out, and the response still remained low. But again, it doesn't answer the question as to why. I've asked some members of the public what their opinions on council consultations are, and the overwhelming response that I get is that they don't really matter, because the council won't listen to what we do or what we say, and they'll just do what they want to do. Unfortunately, it would appear to me that this consultation is a prime example of that. People were consulted. There's no legal mechanism to say that there has to be X amount of people must reply in order for it to be valid. So I look at the people that did respond and the 52.6% that did not agree with that proposal. So I take their views on board when considering the recommendations. With that, that's why I've put forward my recommendation that the overwhelming majority of the people that did respond to the public consultation showed a clear majority against that. As an elected member of Angus Council representing Forfar District, I also need to take and think of the views of other people within Angus, whether it be this committee or any of the others that I sit on, and I take those considerations into my considerations when deciding to agree with a recommendation or not. And in this case, I'm going to side with the overwhelming majority of those that did respond and take their views into account and go with what they would like to see us as their elected members do, and that is not to close these schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have your seconder? Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, just following on from what Councillor Gregg has said, like, we're here as councillors to represent our constituents and act as a voice, and given that 52.6% did not agree with the proposals, that's why I'm also in favour of the amendment.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No, there are no questions. I am going to go with the recommendations. I take your points, but I do actually understand that the people, the parents who went around with the Education Scotland people, the inspector, in agreement with the way in which the nursery was going to be functioning after this. There's going to be greater resources for them, for all the children, and the parents were very pleased with that. It was a terribly small number who replied. A lot of people got the opportunity to put in their recommendations, their ideas, and they really didn't take it up. So I think that we, on the basis that the inspectorate thinks such is a really good way forward, I want to go with the recommendations. And I have a seconder, Councillor Melville.
Yes, thanks, Convener. Very little to add beyond what you've said already so eloquently. I think as well something for me is that we do not need to have denominational nursery schools. And I think that whereas this is obviously a closure of two, it is actually a merger. And we've already heard that it will lead to better education for these kids. And so that is why I am seconding it.
If there's nobody who wants to say anything else just now, Councillor Duff does.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I mean, obviously consultations are important, but this is a kind of a nuanced decision. I mean, the consultation is one factor. We've got advice or recommendations from officers. And, you know, as Councillor Devine has said, the number of people who've taken part in this consultation is absolutely tiny. And we're doing lots of consultations as a council. And I'm elected by 12,000 people. I know my responsibility is to them, and really very, very small numbers of a consultation. And to say, talking about 52% when we're talking about less than 20 people is just it's a nonsense. There's not enough responses. If we'd got 50 responses and it was 45-5, then that would be a factor I think that would help me in making a decision. But when you've got such a small, it's not really something that I think we give an awful lot of weight to. So I think consultations are important, but you have to look at the number of people participating, and it helps to make a decision. But we aren't going to consult 19 people and take the views of 10 against 9 or whatever it is. It's just not the way we should be taking decisions. So interesting consultation. It's disappointing we didn't have a much larger number of people responding.
Thank you. Are there any more comments? Then we'll go to the vote. Thank you, Liz. Sorry? No, I'm not seeing anything. Right, we'll go to the vote.
Convener, you have the opportunity to sum up, if you so wish.
I do have the opportunity, but I think everything's been said.
Okay, so the motion by yourself, Convener, seconded by Councillor Melville, is to approve the recommendations as detailed in the report. The amendment by Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Louise Nicol, is with the results of the public consultation showing a clear majority against the administrative closure of Hazlehead and St Thomas nursery classes, that they remain open. Please vote motion or amendment, and Mrs Mackenzie will do the roll call.
Convener.
Motion.
Councillor Shepherd.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Bell.
Motion.
Councillor Braze.
Motion.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Gall.
Amendment.
Councillor Gregg.
Amendment.
Councillor Meakin.
Motion.
Councillor Melville.
Motion.
Councillor Gavin Nicol.
Amendment.
Councillor Louise Nicol. Councillor Proctor.
Amendment.
Councillor Spade.
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Amendment.
Councillor Boyd.
Motion.
Mrs Wilson.
Motion.
Convener, the motion is carried by 11 votes to 6.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to number 6, amendments to early learning and childcare enrolment arrangements. And Kelly McIntosh again.
Thank you, Convener. This report seeks approval to remove the current additional non-statutory admission of children to early learning and childcare each October. This would result in revised admission dates from August 2024. Angus Council currently offers a non-statutory intake each October, in addition to the 3 mandatory intakes in August, January and April. This does not align with almost all other local authorities in Scotland. In recent years, there has been increased flexibility of early learning and childcare through the introduction of 1140 hours of provision. The number of children deferring entry to school has increased, and there has also been a welcome increase in funded early learning and childcare places for eligible 2-year-olds. Both of those factors have placed additional demands in early years staffing and resources. If agreed today, the decision would also be an annual cost saving of circa £75,000 per year. Again, I'm joined by Neil and Sheena, who are happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Bell?
Thank you. And I'm actually just curious to know what the rationale was for having the extra enrolment slot put in the calendar in the first place, because it does sound like quite a considerable administrative task. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bell. I don't know the historical decisions that were made a number of years ago, but I think our local authorities were given a large amount of flexibility as to how they would implement 1140 hours. And so we took the view that we would try to support 4 intakes rather than the mandatory 3, because we had the additional resources at that time. We no longer have those additional resources, and with the increased deferrals and the approach taken now to offer deferral back to August, I think it's probably time to change that. But I think in the first instance, it was done with the best of intentions when we were able to facilitate that.
Thank you, Neil. Any other questions? Councillor Shepherd?
Just think it's an example of a saving that, it's a good saving, and there's still plenty of intakes, so it's not really going to have any negative consequences for anybody. So it's just a good example that there is still savings that we can have, that, they're not all bad, as the press might have you believe. So, yeah, happy to see this go through. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Okay, recommendations are 2, approve the removal of this non-statutory additional admission, and secondly, approve the revised start dates for early learning and childcare provision. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much.
John, can you stop the live stream, please?